Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Carrie Potter. I am an educational support coach with Family Matters. And so Family Matters Parent Training and Information Center has launched a podcast. So we are offering podcasts now. We're adding this format as a way to reach more Illinois families and professionals with key information about disability support and special education advocacy and navigation. So the podcast will bring the voice and the experience of a variety of professionals and families to the table with a focus on exploring experiences, introducing best practices that are being implemented across the state, exploring services and supports, and sharing the input and guidance of families. So join the conversation on your favorite podcast app. We can be found at Family Matters PTIC Podcast. And as a reminder, Family Matters Parent Training Information Center is not a legal services agency and cannot provide legal advice. So information that you receive in this podcast should not be construed as legal advice. Family Matters Parent Training Information Center is one of 2 federally funded parent training and information centers in Illinois. And the contents of this podcast were developed under a grant from the U.S. Department of Education. However, those contents do not necessarily represent the policy of the U.S. Department of Education, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal government. And our project officer is David Emmenheiser. Today we have Tess and Krista on our podcast, and I appreciate you both joining us. Today, Tess and Krista are going to talk about their partnership and working together to support D. So I will let you both introduce yourself a little further.
Hi, my name is Tessa, and I am a parent of a boy who is 14. He is in 8th grade, and he has been with the school district his whole life since starting in the pre-K program. He has autism spectrum disorder and an IEP and an individualized aid and ADHD. So that's what we've got.
Hi, I'm Krista Eckert, and I'm Dee's special education case manager and his language arts teacher. I've had him in 7th and 8th grade, supported him both in the classroom and outside of the classroom, and with partnership with his family have hopefully helped him grow and get him ready to go on to high school next year.
All right, well, thank you both for joining and introducing yourselves. So we'll jump into the questions. The first question that I have for you both is, what strengths do you both bring to the partnership? And Tessa, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. So I think I feel like I'm willing to help with the workload. I try to attend as many trainings as I can, even through Family Matters or StarNet, different services that the Arc of Illinois provides, so that way I can understand what are best practices that are done for kiddos like mine. I try to follow advocates on social media, other providers, to kind of understand the decisions that they make, so that I follow what the school is doing to understand the school operations, funding models, state standards, and I really try to develop positive relationships with teachers and staff and administration. I recognize that I am not the expert on all things special education because I have not been trained in it, but I do what I can to kind of partner with the school, because I know that everyone there and me, we just have my son's success at heart.
Thank you for sharing that, Krista. How about you? What strengths do you bring to the partnership?
Well, I think being a mom myself is a big strength. Just knowing that every family, sorry, my lights go out. Every family always wants, the best for their child. I've taught in the junior high for 26 years. So knowing the ins and outs of the junior high model and junior high students gives me a good background of some of the challenges that our students with IEPs face. I think in a model of being part of a team as well. I don't stand alone in any way, shape, or form to try to get a successful outcome for our students. It takes our teachers, it takes our administrators, our social worker, and definitely the family to, help the kiddos grow from where they start when we get them and get them as far as we can before we send them on.
Thank you for sharing that. I think you both shared great points as far as, partnership and IEP is about that student, and, communication really is key. I found that with my own child when she had an IEP and was in school, that open communication and always looking to each other for advice. Like, as a parent, you may know your child at home, but you don't always see everything they do at school. So that communication and really working together is helpful. Our next question is, can you share a particular challenge that you have worked through to ensure that the students' needs were met? So whoever wants to go first on that.
Yeah, I mean, I can start on what I feel was our biggest challenge. So, I mean, obviously we've had hurdles throughout the years, but I think the biggest one occurred really just last year. Our son, he, starting 7th grade at our district is the beginning of junior high. So it's the changing of classes, more teachers involved, just the hormones of being in junior high as well. And so, we kind of felt like 7th grade was when things kind of broke. And so there at the time, he didn't have the diagnoses that he has now. And so we just noticed that there were more challenging behaviors. He really didn't want to do the work, having frustration, melting down, things like that. And so, we went to the pediatrician and he had said like, well, maybe he needs to be better evaluated, even though we've done things in the past, like maybe it's time to look at some things a little bit differently. And I just went to Krista to say, what do we want to need something, so his IEP meeting was coming up, and I just really needed to get an eval of, let's look at this again, what can we do to make sure that we've looked at all of the testing to understand what are his skills, what are his abilities, what are his challenges, what really does need to be done for modifications and accommodations, because really I just didn't know what to look to high school. So how do we get through 7th and 8th grade, but then also like, what are we setting up for high school? And I really just felt like I didn't know much about that. And so Krista was very helpful in getting a really successful IEP meeting, getting the people at the table that needed to be there for us to be able to really evaluate him. And she came prepared with data. It was evidence-based. She had notes, she had documentation of everything that had been, that he'd done that year. And then we were able to really create what I feel was a very positive, very different kind of IEP approach as well, that I think has been serving him much better now. Going in 8th grade has just been, I feel like, very different. And she's also really helped him prepare for high school and really start thinking about growing up, being more independent, kind of holding himself accountable to things. So he was just really struggling with the transition, and she has really helped that. That it hasn't happened yet. We'll be there in August, but I feel much more positive about how that's going to go.
Thank you for sharing that. What do you have to share on that, Krista?
Well, I think Dee is not the only student who starts 7th grade and struggles. And so while I was prepared for that, I also have learned through the years to watch the children and see how they handle certain situations. Of course, there are some that I can predict that are going to happen. But the start of 7th grade is my first experience with students too. So I like to let them show me who they are and how they're going to handle things. And then lean on, what I know about teenagers and junior high school to, come up with with ways to support them. There have been lots of times that we've had to think outside of the box. Dee's not a typical student, but he's a student nonetheless, and he's a teenager, and you know, just always keeping his learning in mind and taking him from where he starts to you know, getting him where we feel we can get him. As a special education teacher, the end goal is different for everybody, and supporting my teachers in understanding that, as well as the students, is important too. Particular challenges that he's had have been some social challenges with peers, and I've relied sorry, the motion sensor in my room keeps going off. I've relied a lot again on our team at school. You know, I may be his case manager, but I don't spend the entire day with him in junior high. So I rely on what the teachers are telling me, working with the social worker, coming up with a plan together. Definitely keeping in touch with home as much as possible. Tess's family has been instrumental in extending what we're trying to do at school at home. And that is a huge component of his successes. Currently, we've pushed a new challenge on him with bringing his phone to school. And he is showing us where he can be successful with that and where he's going to struggle. And sometimes it's even just, you know, giving him the boundaries that he needs to learn within. Students will run with things if you let them, whether they have disabilities or not. So, you know, giving him the grace to make mistakes and learn from them. Letting him learn to, you know, be a student and meet the expectations that are given to him as well. So, and all the while keeping in touch with home so they know what's going on here, so that they can have the same conversations with him that we do here.
I appreciate you both sharing on that, and I think that'll really, you know, your scenarios will really show viewers like how you know, Tessa, as a parent, feel comfortable working with your IEP team and, you know, talking with school staff to express, hey, these concerns are going on, and Krista, that you're able to share such research-based data and really look at all of the, you know, as a team work together to look at all of the different data and information to look at how do we most appropriately meet his needs. And the fact that you're saying, you know, hey, he's a student, and you know, sometimes we just have to see what his abilities are and where do we need to step in and help and teach him, you know, rules and things, and that all students are going to, you know, have to learn how to use their phones in different settings and things like that. So, you know, it teaches him to learn those rules at school. And, you know, I mean, I think all learn best when we learn for ourselves and have those experiences. So the next question is, how are your perspectives similar and how are they different?
Yeah. I mean, I think that we are similar in the fact that we both want Dee to be successful. We want all the kids to be successful. I think that, you know, our perspective on keeping a strong communication is pretty important. Both of us, we always respond definitely within 24 hours, but sometimes minutes, you know, like it's just depending on where you are with email. But yeah, I think that she gives me grace. I'm the one that needs it because I feel like I'm definitely learning every day. It's like, well, that's something I haven't encountered before. And she bears with me to help kind of walk through, you know, how to navigate it. And truly understanding those, what is typical teenage behavior, because this is my first teenager, and so how to work through that. So I think that we are similar in our communication style, and that we want to stay connected. We want to keep each other involved. I think that we both want to mirror what the other is doing. So whatever any member of the team is doing, I try to bring home and to reiterate at home, and giving heads up of like, oh, well, there's this thing that he's struggling with, just to let you know, he's kind of worried about it. So that way they can kind of know what's going on if he says something or does something. I think that they can do that. So we're pretty good in that. I mean, I don't really know that we necessarily do things differently. I don't feel like we think or behave differently. It's just that our perspectives are obviously different, because I'm thinking about my one and she's thinking about her whole 8th, 7th, 8th grade worth of kids, right? So I think that that's just different, but I don't think that there's anything that stands in the way of our working relationship.
Krista, do you want to share?
Yeah, I think one of the similarities that we have is that we're both moms. And once I had a child of my own go through this grade level, I think my perspective on things changed greatly. And the way that I do things at school, each one of the kiddos that I teach, I feel like are a little part of me. And I think about what I would want if this was my child struggling with this issue. Same goes with celebrating the wins. It's hard to be a mom at home, let alone having a child with a disability. And so when they do have successes, I want to share those at home, because it keeps you going as a parent to know that something is going right once in a while. So, I definitely try to take that into perspective when I can. I would say the only difference is, that I have just lived in junior high school for a really long time. And I have sent a lot of students onto the high school. I get scared for them as well, but I also know what a wonderful place we're sending them to. And I hopefully can help parents and students transition to those people and those services at the high school. I do think that our communication style is similar. We definitely like to, do the email. Sometimes I even start by saying, please don't read this until Monday morning. And Tessa does too, because we know that I may be working on the weekend, but you may need a break. And so there's definitely that mutual respect there for that. So yeah, I think there's definitely a lot more similarities than differences. Keeping communication positive is always well appreciated as well. Some parents don't always communicate in a positive manner, and it's so greatly appreciated when there is a struggle you have to address a parent with, and you're going to get at least an understanding response back, and then coming up with a solution together is definitely appreciated.
I think from listening to you both, I can tell that you really have a good solid foundation for, built a solid foundation for working together. And, it sounds like you have a lot of similarities in communication, and you're respectful of, hey, don't look at this until Monday, because, you recognize that the other person may not have time to look at that right away. And I think that's a huge component of communication, is figuring out like what time of day is good for you, or what method of communication. And it sounds like you've really all worked together as a team to, make it go as smoothly as possible. The next question that I have is, what guidance would you give a parent or a teacher who might be struggling to develop a positive partnership?
Yeah, I think it's just important to try to recognize the other person's perspective. I know that can sometimes be challenging, but I think starting off believing that the other person is there to do good is important. And then really do everything you can to learn, so whether that is, for a parent, learning more about how a school operates, and then for teachers, staff, administrators, really understanding what it is like for a parent to go through it, especially if it's the parent's first, child with a disability, and then maybe it's their first time ever encountering any of this. They don't, it's so hard to understand. It's so overwhelming. I mean, I remember being, when we first had this IEP, I didn't know what that was. I didn't know it's like, oh, well, here's all your rights. And they give you that thick packet of your rights as a parent. Like, I don't understand any of this. It's very, very overwhelming. And so it's so much, it would be so easy to just say, whatever you need to do, just do it. I don't know. I don't know how to handle it. And so I think, really trying to do the best to understand each other. But I also feel like it's really important, especially whenever you go out to social media, to understand some parents' perspectives, or some educators' perspectives, or social workers, speech language pathologists. Sometimes the social media platform is a place of venting, and so making sure that you are not taking in that negativity as this is the experience that you're going to have. And then also, if you did happen to have a negative experience with one particular person, that's not everyone. So just trying to kind of take each individual person for who they are and what they are doing. I think it's also, and it's something that I have to remind myself of. And I have a younger child who does not have a disability and is in the same school system. And so while I recognize that there might be something that would be great for D, well, that's not necessarily helpful to all the other kids, And so I think just trying to have an understanding that the teachers and the staff and the building are trying to represent every child, and having grace for that, recognizing what our child's rights are, and what is available to them and should be available to them. But also recognizing that, like, the school is doing the best that they can, and then if it is to a point where maybe it's really is not going well, it's documentation, and it's reaching out to Family Matters, for help, and trying to kind of get just get information and advocates on your side. But so knowing that there are resources available, but really just trying to have those kind of open, inclusive, crucial conversations, as positive as you can.
Okay, thank you. What about you, Krista?
Well, I would say, and I always tell parents, you are your child's best advocate. We spend a lot of time with your children, but you spend way more, and you know them way better than we do. But to be that advocate in an effective way takes a partnership. And starting out with conflict right away with a parent or a teacher is never a great place to start. Approaching any situation, whether it's conflict or a positive thing, with a respectful manner is definitely well appreciated. Teachers have a lot of students to handle every day. There are a lot of students in our building, but my IEP students are my kiddos, and I look at each one of them individually. And that's important for a special education teacher to realize that it's not a one-size-fits-all plan for our special education students. And one may need something different than another. For teachers, I would say, especially special education teachers, actually having a good relationship with your teaching partners and the staff in your building is pretty key as well. When you go to them with a different plan, or what may look like a strange request for a student, if you have that positive relationship within your building, other teachers who work with those students are going to be much more willing to try things and to communicate with you when they're going well and when they're not. Teachers know the kiddos at school, and parents know the kiddos at home. And so, this is the same child, even though they're in different environments. And so, just having to work together is the best possible way to get the best outcome for the child. To teachers, sometimes we're given these files that have lots and lots of data and lots of information, and we see all of that before we meet a student. And some teachers just really dive right into that, and they think they know what they're getting and how they're going to handle things. I think it's important to know some of the struggles that a child has had and be prepared for how you're going to handle things. But, one of the biggest keys is to let these students show you how they're going to handle things, especially in a transition like from an elementary to a junior high school. And then again, real quickly, we're getting ready to make another transition to the high school. So on the other side, knowing what's coming and trying to get them as ready as much as you possibly can. So I just think putting yourself in the other person's perspective is also key to ultimately helping the student.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you both have shared. Again, I think you really drive home the point that ongoing communication and just having understanding and try to take the other person's perspective is very helpful, because you want to try to put yourself in the other person's shoes and see where they're coming from. And there may be difficult things to discuss when you're navigating the special education process, a student's difficulties, things like that. But working together, and if something's not working and you're having to revisit it, like Krista, I think you mentioned, just, I may come with this request that sounds strange or whatever, but thinking outside of the box and thinking what might be appropriate for the student, it's always helpful, because like you said, it is an individualized, system, and you're wanting to look at that student as an individualized, person and what their individual needs are. So our last question is, what can be done from the very start to ensure that a relationship between an educator and a parent is positive and effective?
Yeah, this is something that has happened with us, and I think that it's really beneficial, is if at all possible, to start off the beginning of, maybe it's the beginning of the year, or maybe it's just the beginning of working with that team. Like with Krista, she was with us 7th and 8th grade, so depending on, if the team kind of stays the same, maybe you don't have to do this every year, but when there is a big transition, like going into junior high, if there is a possibility to have a meeting right before school starts, or kind of early, once even school has started, I think from a parent perspective, it is so very helpful for me to meet and know the faces of the people that are going to be responsible for my child. And I feel that more strongly with Dee than I do with my other child. Because I feel like this is where I would love you to give him grace, because I know that these are the difficulties. These are some things that we have worked through, and this is how he needs to have boundaries, and because I think my go-to is like, I want to help. And so I could tend to micromanage, right? Like, well, you need to be doing these things because that's what works, thinking I'm helpful. And that might not be helpful at all. It might actually be better if I wasn't involved in certain things, because they might see better results. And so they might be able to share that with me. So I think just being able to have that initial conversation around, here's my boundaries, here's the educator's boundaries, here's the student's boundaries, like, what are our rights and responsibilities, how can we be most successful and effective in what we're doing, so that as early as possible we get to know each other. Because if I know Krista, and I can call her by her first name, and she calls me by my first name, like, that matters a lot to me, and that helps me to connect with her and to know her. And so then if there is something, that my child comes home and he tells a story and it's like he's really upset, well, I have that understanding of like, knowing, well, that's not how this would have taken place. Like I can kind of put some perspective into, like, I bet this was what was required and this is how this happened, to better navigate those difficult situations that come up because we know each other and we've had that conversation. I think it's also just really nice too, because then I feel like the kiddos are best prepared when they know who their team is before all of the heavy loads of the semester get put on them. So I think, again, communication just being the key, but that also just getting to know each other as people a little bit as much as you can. And even if it's a Zoom call, it's obviously, it's also being, as a parent, I need to be respectful that of the educator's time. Like they have things they've got to do. So like trying to kind of be mindful of everybody's time and their boundaries, but just trying to get to know each other as people, and really kind of understand, what do you need? How can I help, as early as possible.
Thank you. Krista, how about you?
I was going to say a lot of the same things.
Okay.
An early meeting on a positive and even personal level is always great. Just knowing that we're all people. There's a person on the other side of that email you're sending, or there's a mom on the other side of that phone call, and there's a child involved. Even getting to know the child a little bit before you're going to have them, if at all possible. We're so lucky that our intermediate center is actually in the same physical building as ours. So we are able to do things like, I can attend the IEP meeting of the 6th grade student. And so while I may not really truly get to know them, at least I put a face to a name with a child and with a parent. And then, I try to start looking out for those kiddos if I can see them in the hallway, and not only becoming a contact person for the family, but, helping that student recognize me and know that, hey, she's going to be someone I see next year. Again, the communication. I think the very beginning of Dee's 7th grade year, I was going to have to miss the first week and a half of school for some health reasons. And I just called Tessa and I was like, hey, these are the things I know to set up. Is there anything else that we can do? And it was a great conversation, and we worked really hard to make sure he had a great start. I didn't end up having to miss as much as I thought I was going to. So, but I was really glad to be comfortable to make that contact. Some parents are not as comfortable to say, hey, by the way, I'm not going to be there for the first week, so good luck, So it was definitely appreciated to be able to approach things that way right off the bat on a personal level.
Yeah, I thank you both for answering all these questions and meeting with us today to offer this podcast. And I think you both really shared so many great pointers. And I think at, the root of it all, it's really like good communication is key, and it's powerful to make everything run smoothly and really to support that student and work through any challenges and things like that. So again, I really appreciate your time in this, and I think that the viewers, I know that they'll really get a lot out of this podcast and seeing the way that you all have collaborated and worked so smoothly together. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.